we were bringing down the explanation of the Mizritcher Magid, that when it says Oilas Chodesh B'Chodshoi, so that's different than Oilas HaTamid. Oilas HaTamid is something that is constant and consistent every day, twice a day, in the morning, in the evening. But in every month, there's a different siruf, a different revelation of Shem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, depending on the combinations over 12 months, 12 Rosh Chodoshim. Similarly, a different letter of the name Aleph, Dal, Nun, Yud, including also the fillers. And that is something that's in specifics and details. Every single Rosh Chodesh has a different one, has a different type of revelation. Whereas, as opposed to that, you have the carbon tamid, that's a general thing. So now, this is what the Tzemach Tzedek brought from the Mizritcher Magid. Now the Tzemach Tzedek is going to explain this to understand this better. So line 20, bottom of the first page. And the Tzemach Tzedek adds to explain this according to Chassidus. And he says as follows. It's not understood what the Mizritcher Magid wrote. That according to the different combinations of Shem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei that shine differently in every month, that according to that is the specific ascent of the carbon of every Rosh Chodesh that is different now. The elevation of Rosh Chodesh Nisan and the ascent of the Karbonos of the Chodesh Nisan is different than Chodesh Tammuz, because the tziruf, the combination of the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei that shines, is different. So the Tzemach Tzedek asks on that, Shari Karbonos shall call Shnei Masar Rosh Chodesh Hem Shavim, the Karbonos of the 12 different months are equal and the same. After Tzirufim Ein Shavim, top of the next page, even though the combinations are different. One month could be Yud Kei Vav Kei, another month could be Hey Vav Yud Hey, etc., etc. So how do you say that the Karbonos are the same Karbonos, but the spirituality is different? So the Tzemach Tzedek explains, we have to say, the Bekavona Talia Milsa, this matter is dependent upon the person's intention. That according to the person's intention and the intention of the bringing of the Karbonis, that is what brings about, that is what results and is connected with the different Hamshachas. The intention in every month of those that brought the Karbonis was according to that particular combination of the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. In a similar vein is explained in a different place, concerning the Karbonis, that the 12 heads of the Shvatim brought when they were dedicating the Mishkan by the Chanukas HaMishkan. We had this not long ago at the end of Parshas Nosoi. Sharei kol HaKarbonis shalahem hayu shavim. All their Karbonis of the Nesiim were exactly identical. So therefore we ask the question, why did it have to explicitly state all the details of the carbon of each particular head of a Shevet, of each Nasi, at length? Instead, after enumerating the first carbon that was by the Shevet Yehuda, he should have said, he should have said that so Nisanel brought in the second day, and so the next Shevet brought in the third day, and so on and so forth. So why is the Torah go through this whole arichas when we know the Torah is very exact and very spare in using words and not saying anything extra? Because every carbon of every nasi was a different hamshacha, was a separate hamshacha, distinct and unique than the carbon of a different nasi. What the nasi of Shevet Yehuda brought was different hamshacha than what the nasi of Shevet Ephraim brought. Lefi shoyrish shifta, it was all according to the root of that particular Shevet's root above. And the intention was different and distinct. Like it's also brought down in Medrash Rabbim, the bowl and the spoon and, or ladle of every nasi was a particular thing that each one hinted for its own thing. It wasn't, even though they brought the same identical things, each one had a hinted, according, even the Medrash Rabbah says, is for something else. Now, the Rebbe adds to this that Karbonis, especially, Kavana is intention, is a basic component of the carbon. We could add to this, when it comes to Karbonis, the intention is a primary and core part of what the carbon is about. I mentioned, like the statement of the Mishnah, that there are 6 things that a person needs to have in mind when he is slaughtering the carbon. He's doing it for a carbon, he's doing it for this person, etc., etc. 6 different things. And practically speaking, when it comes to the shlechting, even though someone didn't have in his heart for one of these things, it's still kosher shutnai bezdin cholu. Still in all, there's the idea of bezdin's tonight. So there is a kavanah, except the person that slaughtered it didn't have it b'kavanah, so someone else had it in kavanah for him. So the bezdin had it in kavanah. So still in all, the importance over here is how to see how vital and how crucial kavanah is over here in the karbonos. We know that the avoid of the kohanim and offering the karbonos is in quietly, not like the Levim. The Levim had musical instruments and sang, which indicated a more external expression, whereas the kohanim were silent and quiet when they did the avoid of the karbonos, indicating a barusa the libet was the will of their heart. It was something internal, meaning it was something having to do with kavanah. So therefore we find how crucial kavanah is to karbonos. And therefore, even though the physical carbon is identical, but by the kavanah being different, it's considered a totally different carbon. So he says in line 19, the Tzaddik concludes, another thing is that the 12 Nesiim, it's not just by chance that there's a number of 12 Nesiim, 12 leaders of Shvatim, and there is 12 Rosh Chodashim. They're connected. And just like we can understand when it comes to the intention of the karbonos of the different Nesiim, that even though they all brought the same carbon, it was distinct karbonos, and they were therefore considered totally different karbonos. Still in all, we can understand Yuvan Gam Inyan Hakavana bekarbonos Rosh Chodashim will also be understood concerning the intention, the karbonos of the Rosh Chodashim. Though in action, although in the actual physical carbon, all the karbonos of every Rosh Chodesh is identical, Mikol Mokum still in all. Hakavana bekarbonos shel kol Rosh Chodesh, the intention in the karbonos of every Rosh Chodesh, was in a different and distinct manner, unique, according to the different combinations of the names of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei and the specific letters of Shem Adonai, we said, that's connected and associated with this month. Now, if you're, and this also has to do and impacts the physical expression of the month. That in these karbonos and in these tzirufim of the I don't know if the karbonos, but these tzirufim of the shemus is dependent also gam shinuya hatkufa zera v'kotzer v'koyer v'choim v'kayetz v'choyref shaloyish baisu. In this dependent the different change of the seasons, the planting season, the harvest season, the cold season, the hot season, the summer season, the winter season, that the Torah says will never cease since the Mabel. Shnei Chadoshim L'chol Echad. These are 6 seasons, not in the secular term seasons, but in the Torah term seasons. These are 2 months for every single one of these seasons. So this has to do with the tzirufim of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei that shine in those particular months. Ella, the only difference is between top of page Zion, between the karbonos of the Nesiim, that each kavana was different and each hamshacha was different, versus the kavanas and the hamshachas of Shem of the different karbonos of the month. When it comes to the karbonos of Nesiim, the matter is emphasized even more, and it's more clear. Since the Torah at length explains and specifies the carbon of every single Nasi individually, without just saying, and so did the next Nasi. As opposed to the Rosh Chodesh, because of it says the oil of the Chodesh in its month, indicating that in its month, every month has its own oilus Chodesh, but it doesn't emphasize it as much as we find it in the other in the karbonos of the sea. Ois Gimel. So now we're going to, once we've explained that about the carbon oil of Rosh Chodesh, now we're going to explain how that is different than the carbon Tamid that we mentioned at the beginning, when we said that the oilus Rosh Chodesh is different than the oilus Tamid. Ois Gimel. Gam achiluk bin oilus Chodesh b'chodshei. Aliyah Sakarbonis Bepratis. And he also explains the difference between the oil of Rosh Chodesh, every Rosh Chodesh, the individual specific ascent of the karbonis that's unique and different for each Rosh Chodesh, versus the oilus Tamid Shu Klalos Kulum Dara Klal. The oilus Tamid is a general carbon. That's a klal that includes everything. It's not like the oilus Chodesh B'Chodshei. The idea of the 12 different combinations of the Eibusher's name, every month shines one of these tzirufim. When do we have these 12 combinations? This is when it's divided into details. There's a level that includes all of them as one. An example of this is this distinction, that there's the details versus the klal. Just like we say concerning Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah comes down a general life force that includes in it all the 12 Rosh Chodashim together as one. Just like in a person's head is included all the specific divisions of the life force of that's spread throughout the entire body, but in the head it's all combined as one. And in a similar vein is the level that includes all these 12 different combinations of the names of Hashem that we mentioned before. And this is the reason for the order of the psukim in our parsha. First, it talks about the Tamid offering that was brought every day. Then he talks about the carbon that was brought on Rosh Chodesh, every single Rosh Chodesh. Initially comes the general thing, and then it comes from there into that's beyond the details and beyond the vision of the details. And afterwards comes the division into details. And now going back to what the Mezritcher Maggid said, that the Mezritcher Maggid makes another example of this type of klal versus prat And we find this in Torah. In Torah, there's also specifically 613 mitzvahs. And in general, there's the 10 commandments, and all of them was said with one dibur, which is anoichi. That is the way the Mezritcher Maggid says. So we see the klal is the Aser Sadibris and anoichi, and the prat is the 630 mitzvahs. So the Rebbe is going to elaborate on what the Mezritcher Maggid says. The idea behind this is the Kishem Sheba Karbonis, Yesh Klal, so prat is just like in Karbonis, there's the general part of Karbonis, and there's the specifics. In other words, the Oilus Tamid, which is the general carbon that includes all the chayes, and the Oilus Rish Chodesh, that every single month is a different type of chayes. Keinu b'chlos ha-Torah, so too it's in the general aspect of Torah. So prat is yesh b'taryag mitzvahs. In specific, in detail, it has 613 mitzvahs. And this is not just limited to the mitzvahs, our division, are in a state of division, but the Torah is the source of the mitzvah, so it's also divided. Since the general idea of Torah study has to be in such a way that the greatness of study is that it brings to action, so therefore in Torah itself there's also the division of 613. Therefore the Torah study is divided in such a way that every mitzvah from the 613 mitzvahs, there is a unique way of, a unique part that we need to study in Torah, because that section in Torah, that part of Torah, is the means through which we know how to fulfill that mitzvah. So in Torah itself, in the study of Torah, there's the divisions of 613 mitzvahs. Then we move back a step. So too, it's also concerning the general aspect of the Aser Sadibris. Tzemach Tzedek, top of page Chesed, Tzemach Tzedek brings down Aser Sadibris yesh taryag oisis. In the Aser Sadibris, there are 613 letters. Keneged taryag mitzvahs, these correspond to the 613 mitzvahs. K'moishe Kosel Barabas Parshas Koirach, like it's brought down in Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Koirach, Chuva Pirish Rashi B'Shem Rab Sadia Goin. It's also, Rashi brings us down the name of Rab Sadia Goin, that all the 613 mitzvahs are hinted, different mitzvahs are hinted in different ones of the Aser Sadibris. So we find that the Aser Sadibris is like a klal for the 613 mitzvahs as they are in the Torah. Take it back a step, go earlier, so now we can go on a higher level. U'b'Aser Sadibris gufim, in the Aser Sadibris themselves, in the Oidlif nehaschalkas Aser Sadibris, yesh megamin in a klal, even before the division into Aser Sadibris, there's also the general level. What's the general level that precedes Aser Sadibris? Shari Aseres Adibris Klulim B'Shnei Dibris Harishoinim Anoichi V'Liyilecha. The Aseres Adibris are included in the first two Dibris, Anoichi and Liyilecha. Kimavur B'Tanya, like explained in Tanya Shem Klal, is called Torah Kulam, that the two first Dibris of Anoichi and Liyilecha include in it the entire Torah. Kidu Dibra Anoichi Koilol Koil Ramach Mitzasasi, because the Dibur of Anoichi includes in it all the 248 positive commandments. And Lo Yilecha includes all the 365 negative commandments. And Alter Rebbe goes on Tanya and explains, based on that, we can understand, since every Yid has this innate revulsion to transgress the mitzvah of Avodah Zarah, he can use that same methodology and approach to perform any mitzvahs hasei and to hold himself away from any mitzvahs loisa. And because these two contain in it all the positive and negative commandments, therefore says that only the first two dibris what the Yidden were able to hear from Hashem. The rest, they were like overwhelmed, they couldn't listen. They told Moshe Rabbeinu, you speak to us and we will listen. But why was it vital then for them to hear those two? Because by hearing those two, they heard the whole Torah. Chazal say. Why? Because since these two are the general inclusive part of the Torah, so by hearing only those two, that was sufficient, and that was identical to as if they were hearing the entire Torah. Yet, going back a step, the inclusion and of the Aser Sadibris and the entire Torah in Anoichi V'Yilacham is still it's still divided into two lines, a binary system, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. So that's still already a division. Let's go back even beyond that division. Well, the phase of Yeshna Kal Shalamayla Miskalkus before even the division of positive and negative, there's also the general levels beyond any division. All of them were said with one utterance or with one dibur of the Aser Sadibris, which is Anoichi. And also the Anoichi as not just the whole dibur of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Shtichem Artzrayim, but just the word Anoichi. This is especially significant according to what it's known. Anoichi, what is the idea of Anoichi? So like the Zohar says, Anoichi Misha Anoichi, I, who I am. It's a way higher than the names of Avaya and Alekecha, Kihu, Bechina, because the level of Anoichi is a level that can't even be grasped by any name. Therefore, Anoichi is not a name. It's not hinted in any letter, and even a point of a letter, like they said in the Zohar, which we know from Tanya, from recently Gersa Tshuva, the point on top of the Yud, that also indicates a level. But Anoichi is not even part of a letter. This level is a type of intermingling in the most highest type of way. Beyond even any type of definitions of a klal and definitions of prat. In other words, up till now we were talking about things that work in the paradigm of klal and prat, the general that includes the details. But here we're dealing with such a high level that's beyond even being categorized as something that's a klal for a prat. It's beyond any such divisions whatsoever. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this with another very interesting question. It's a little bit puzzling when we read the what it says over there in the Chumash about the Olos Tamid. We said that the Tamid is something that's the klal, and the Resh Chodesh is the prat. Why does the Torah use the term Olas Tamid ha'asuya b'Har Sinai? That's made, done on Har Sinai. Rashi Taki gives two explanations. Either it's talking about what was done in the days of the Miluyim, during the training days, during the inauguration days of prior to the actual inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the Mishkan, in other words, the last days of Adar. So just like the Korban Oila was done then, so too it's to be done in a daily basis, the Korban Tamid. Another example or another explanation Rashi says that has to do with the Korban Oila that was brought prior to Matan Torah at Har Sinai. Yet, why the emphasis? Why is it a need to bring this in, the idea of Har Sinai right now? What does that help with understanding the idea of the Olas Tamid? But based on what we just now explained, the connection with the klal, that the Olas Tamid is the klal, and we said the same thing, that by Anoichi, that was the klal for the entire Torah. So it informs us, just like Anoichi, so too the Olas Tamid, as we will, Emer Hashem, learn tomorrow.